The toy store was bustling with excited children and parents, all eager to grab the perfect gifts as Christmas music filled the air. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. Among the chaos, a man in his early 40s stood near the shelves, gripping a price tag like it was a weight too heavy to bear. His face was etched with exhaustion, his jacket worn and frayed. Beside him stood a little boy with sparkling eyes, staring longingly at a shiny remote-controlled car displayed on the highest shelf. "Dad, do you think Santa will bring me this one?" the boy asked innocently, his voice filled with hope. The man swallowed hard, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Maybe, buddy, but Santa's been pretty busy this year, you know. Let's keep looking." The boy nodded, though his eyes lingered on the toy as they moved down the aisle. His father's hand tightened slightly on the shopping cart, filled only with discounted wrapping paper and a small stuffed animal. He looked at the price again, his heart sinking. $89.99, way out of reach. Nearby, a man in a dark beanie and a casual black jacket walked in. His steps were quiet, almost unnoticed, but there was something about him that radiated calmness. Keanu Reeves scanned the shelves with no urgency, his eyes catching the little boy as he reached up, stretching his tiny fingers toward the toy. The father quickly pulled his son back, whispering, "Don't touch it, Jake. We're just looking." Keanu paused, pretending to browse as he observed the father and son from a distance. Something about the way the man hunched his shoulders, the tired lines on his face. It wasn't just the weight of Christmas shopping, it was something deeper. He leaned forward as Jake let out a soft sigh, whispering, "It's okay, Dad. Maybe next year." The father looked away quickly, his lips tight as if he were holding something back. Keanu could feel the ache in the man's silence. What Keanu did next would turn their evening into something they'd never forget. As the father and son continued down the aisle, Keanu casually approached the display where the remote-controlled car sat. He tilted his head, pretending to inspect the toy closely, then reached up and took it off the shelf. Holding it in his hands, he glanced over his shoulder, watching as the little boy's head turned back for one last wistful look at the car before his father gently nudged him forward. "Excuse me," Keanu called out softly, his voice calm but commanding enough to catch their attention. The father stopped and turned, his expression wary. Jake looked up at the stranger, curious but polite. Keanu smiled warmly and crouched to the boy's level. "Hey buddy, is this the one you were looking at?" Jake's eyes lit up, and he nodded eagerly. "Yeah, but we're just looking." His tone mimicked his father's earlier words, almost as if he was trying to make peace with the disappointment. Keanu chuckled gently and looked up at the father. "He's got great taste. This one's a classic." He then shifted his gaze back to Jake. "You know, I was thinking of picking this up, but I'm not sure it's the right one for me. What do you think? Should I get it?" Jake blinked in surprise, caught off guard by the question. "For you? But aren't you too old to play with cars?" Keanu laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "You're probably right, but maybe you can help me out. How about I buy it, and you test it for me? Tell me if it's good enough. Deal?" The boy's mouth opened, but before he could say anything, his father stepped in, shaking his head. "That's kind of you, but we really can't." Keanu stood up, cutting him off with a reassuring smile. "Hey, it's no problem, really. I'm just a guy who loves Christmas and making sure the right toy ends up with the right kid. Call it an early holiday spirit." The father hesitated, his pride and gratitude clashing in his eyes. "I can't let you do that. We don't even—" He stopped himself, glancing down at Jake, who was staring at the car like it was magic. Keanu leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "I know it's tough, but sometimes it's okay to let someone give, especially at Christmas. Let me do this for you and your boy." The father's eyes welled up for a brief moment before he blinked it away. He nodded slowly, his voice tight. Thank you. I don't even know your name. Keanu smiled again, handing the card to Jake. Just a guy who loves Christmas, he said, giving the boy a quick wink. But this wasn't over. Not yet. As they walked toward the register, Keanu silently followed, pulling out his wallet for what was about to come next. At the register, the cashier rang up the toy, her cheerful holiday spirit evident in her smile. Jake held the car box tightly, as if afraid it might disappear at any moment, his excitement bubbling over into happy little hops. His father, still processing the unexpected kindness, stood silently, his hands fidgeting with the worn edge of his wallet. Keanu stepped forward just as the total appeared on the screen. "I've got this," he said, sliding his credit card onto the counter before the father could react. "No, please, you've already done enough," the father protested, his voice cracking slightly. He reached for his wallet, but Keanu placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Trust me, this is the easy part," Keanu said with a soft smile. "Just let your boy enjoy Christmas. You've done the hard part, raising him right." The father stared at him for a moment, his pride and gratitude warring once again. Eventually, he nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, really." Keanu finished the payment, but he wasn't done yet. As the cashier bagged the car, he glanced at Jake. "Hey, buddy, do you mind waiting here for a second? I've got something else I need to check out." Jake nodded eagerly, clutching the bag like it was the greatest treasure he'd ever received. Keanu disappeared into the aisles for a moment. The father watched him go, his brow furrowing in confusion. When Keanu returned, he was carrying several other toys, some wrapped in bright holiday packaging, others practical, like warm winter clothes. He placed them on the counter and gestured for the cashier to ring them up as well. "What are you doing?" the father asked, his voice rising in disbelief. Keanu turned to him, his expression calm but resolute. "Look, I know what it's like to go through tough times. I've been there. And I know it's not just about one gift. It's about making memories, about feeling like this season isn't out of reach just because life's been hard. So, let me make sure you guys have a little extra this year." The father's lips parted as if to argue, but the words never came. Instead, his shoulders sagged slightly, and he let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Keanu replied gently. "Just promise me you'll have a great Christmas together. That's all I ask." The cashier handed over the extra bags, her own eyes misty as she whispered, "Merry Christmas." Keanu picked up the bags and handed them to the father, who accepted them with trembling hands. Jake looked up at his dad, then at Keanu, his face glowing with uncontainable joy. "You're like Santa!" Jake exclaimed, his innocent laughter filling the store. Keanu chuckled softly, crouching down to meet the boy's gaze once more. "Nah, Santa's way cooler than me. But hey, you've got to promise me one thing. Have the best Christmas ever, okay?" Jake nodded enthusiastically. "I promise." Keanu straightened, giving the father a final nod before heading toward the exit. But just as he was about to leave, something happened that would change everything. As Keanu approached the exit, he noticed a commotion at the front of the store. A young woman was arguing with the manager, her face flushed with embarrassment as she clutched a small bag in her hands. She looked frazzled, as if the weight of the world was bearing down on her. The manager's voice was loud and condescending, drawing the attention of nearby shoppers. "This isn't a charity," the manager barked. "If you can't afford what you're buying, then maybe you shouldn't be here." The woman's voice trembled. I made a mistake with the cash I had. I thought it would be enough. Please, it's just a small gift for my nephew." The scene sent a wave of tension through the room. Keanu paused, his eyes narrowing slightly as he assessed the situation. The father and Jake, still standing nearby with their bags, noticed it too. Jake tugged at his dad's sleeve. "Why is that man being so mean?" he whispered, his wide eyes filled with concern. Keanu stepped forward, his calm yet commanding presence silencing the escalating argument. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady but firm. "What seems to be the problem here?" The manager turned, his irritation evident as he sized up Keanu. "This lady is holding up the line because she can't pay for her items," he said, rolling his eyes. "She's wasting everyone's time." Keanu tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "And yelling at her helps with that, how?" The manager sputtered, caught off guard by the question. Keanu shifted his attention to the woman who was holding back tears. "How much is it?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her pride warring with her need. "It's only $20, she murmured, barely audible. Keanu didn't hesitate. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crisp bill, and handed it to the cashier. "Here, cover it, and let her keep the change," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The room fell silent. The manager's face turned red, and he muttered something under his breath before slinking away. The woman stared at Keanu, her eyes welling up. I don't even know what to say. Thank you so much." Keanu smiled softly. "You don't have to say anything. Just make sure your nephew has a great Christmas." The moment seemed to hang in the air, heavy with emotion. Jake watched in awe, clutching his dad's hand. "He's really like Santa," Jake whispered again, this time with even more conviction. But just as Keanu was about to turn and leave once more, the father stepped forward, his voice breaking the silence. "Wait," he said. "Why are you doing all of this? For us? For her? For strangers?" Keanu paused, looking at the father with a thoughtful expression. "Because once, someone did it for me," he said simply. The room seemed to exhale collectively, the weight of his words settling over everyone. Without another word, Keanu gave the boy a quick wink and walked out of the store, leaving behind not just toys and kindness, but a memory that would ripple through the lives of everyone who witnessed it. As the doors closed behind him, the father looked down at Jake, his voice soft. "Remember this, son. This is what real generosity looks like." And in that moment, Jake made a promise to himself. One day he would pay it forward, just like the man who had walked into their lives and changed everything. Days turned into weeks, but the memory of that night at the toy store lingered in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. The father couldn't stop replaying the events in his mind, Keanu's quiet kindness, his unexpected wisdom, and the way he had effortlessly turned a difficult evening into a magical one. Every time he saw Jake playing with the toy robot, his heart swelled with gratitude. But life had its way of throwing curveballs. A few days before Christmas, the father received a call from the factory where he worked. The company was cutting costs, and he was one of the many being let go. His heart sank as he hung up the phone, wondering how he would break the news to Jake. The joy that had blossomed from their encounter with Keanu now seemed overshadowed by a new weight of uncertainty. That evening, Jake noticed his father's somber mood. "Dad, are you okay?" he asked, his innocent eyes filled with concern. The father forced a smile. "I'm fine, buddy. Just a little tired." Jake nodded, but deep down, he knew something was wrong. He hugged his toy robot tightly, as if it could somehow make things better. "It's okay, Dad," he said softly. "We still have each other." The father hugged his son, holding back tears. He wished he could shield Jake from the struggles of the world, but reality wasn't always kind. The next morning, as they sat at the breakfast table, there was a knock at the door. Confused, the father got up to answer it. Standing on the porch was a delivery man, holding a large envelope. "For you," the man said, handing it over before disappearing down the street. The father opened the envelope cautiously. Inside was a handwritten note and a single check. His eyes widened as he read the note aloud. "To the kind man who taught his son the true meaning of generosity, I hope this helps you through the tough times. Merry Christmas to you and Jake." Kake. His hands trembled as he unfolded the check. The amount written on it was enough to cover their expenses for several months. He stared at it, speechless, as Jake peered up at him curiously. "What is it, Dad?" It's a Christmas miracle," he whispered, still in shock. Jake beamed. Was it from him, the nice man from the store? The father nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. "Yes, buddy, it was." Later that evening, as they sat by their small Christmas tree, the father found himself reflecting on everything. He realized that the encounter with Keanu had been more than just a chance meeting. It had been a reminder of the power of kindness and the importance of paying it forward. And as the snow fell gently outside their window, Jake looked up at his dad and said, "One day, I'm going to help people too, just like he did." The father smiled, his heart full. "I know you will, son. I know you will." Somewhere far away, Keanu Reeves sat quietly in his home, sipping a cup of tea by the fire. A faint smile played on his lips as he thought about the father and son, knowing that his small act of kindness had sparked something far greater. And that was all he ever wanted, a world where kindness didn't just end, it multiplied. Years passed, but the impact of that Christmas never faded. Jake grew up remembering the lessons he learned from that night, not just about receiving kindness, but about giving it. His father's resilience and Keanu Reeves's unexpected generosity became the foundation of Jake's values, shaping the man he would become. By the time Jake was in college, he had started his own small charity, focused on helping struggling families during the holiday season. Every Christmas, he and a group of volunteers would visit toy stores, pay off layaways, and hand-deliver gifts to families in need. He called it the kindness chain. The name was a tribute to the idea that one act of compassion could inspire countless others. One December, just as Jake was preparing for the biggest charity drive yet, his father approached him with a knowing smile. "You're really making a difference, Jake. I'm so proud of you." Jake hugged him. "You taught me everything, Dad, and, well, you know who started it all." His father nodded, his eyes misty. "I wonder if he ever thinks about us." Jake laughed. "He probably doesn't even remember. But that's the point, isn't it? True kindness doesn't need recognition." Later that week, Jake and his team were busy organizing a surprise Christmas event at a local shelter. They had coordinated food, decorations, and gifts for over 50 families. As the festivities began, Jake noticed a quiet man in the back of the room, dressed in a simple black coat and jeans. There was something familiar about his demeanor, calm, humble, and observant. Jake approached him, his curiosity piqued. "Hi, I don't think we've met. I'm Jake." The man smiled warmly. "Hi, Jake. I'm just here to help." Jake froze. The voice, the mannerisms, it all clicked. "Wait, is it really you?" he whispered, his heart pounding. Keanu Reeves chuckled softly. "Guilty as charged." Jake was momentarily speechless, his mind racing. I don't know what to say. You changed our lives. I've wanted to thank you for years." Keanu shook his head gently. "You don't need to thank me, Jake. Look around you. Everything you've done, it's thanks enough." Jake glanced at the room, filled with laughter, joy, and hope. Families who had been struggling were smiling. Kids were unwrapping gifts, and volunteers were sharing warm meals with strangers. It was everything he had dreamed of creating. "You taught me what it means to give," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted to carry it forward." Keanu placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "You didn't just carry it forward. You built something extraordinary. I'm proud of you, Jake." The two stood there for a moment, surrounded by the buzz of holiday cheer, connected by the invisible thread of that one Christmas night so many years ago. As the evening came to a close, Keanu quietly slipped away, leaving Jake to reflect on the full circle moment. He realized that the true gift wasn't just what Keanu had given him and his father. It was the ripple effect it created, touching countless lives over the years. And as Jake watched the snow begin to fall outside, he made a silent promise. No matter where life took him, he would never stop the kindness chain. Because in the end, the smallest acts of compassion had the power to change everything.